Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a preview show for the 2021 RSM Classic. Now, if you follow me, you know I typically start out every week with a course fit video and then usually a stat fit video, which really hasn't been a thing over the last 3 weeks. I decided to kind of change things up a bit. I am trying to target more of a shorter video that's more to the point than an analysis video for all 3 of my videos. So I plan to do a preview, course fit, and then strategy video Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And the preview video, all it's going to really go over trends that I've seen over, X amount of years whenever I started recording data for this event, which for the RSM Classic goes back to 2014. And then I'm going to also look at the bucket system. So I'm going to do that here as opposed to the strategy video. Again, that should kind of cut back time on that strategy video and actually get more useful information with that one. So this one is just really going over trends and buckets. Timestamps are in the description. You can go ahead and get to any part of that, any part of the video you'd like there. Also, the chapter mode is enabled on YouTube, so you can go ahead on the red progress bar, see where you're at and wherever you want to go. You can also watch this in a faster speed, but again, I'm going to try to make this a little quicker. So let's go ahead and get into the spreadsheet. We're going to start with the bucket system because that is kind of the staple of what I do. And basically all that the bucket system tells you is the likelihood of a certain profile golfer or a certain profile of golfer, what's likelihood they're going to finish inside the top 10 or even top 5. So with that being said, looking on the screen, and for my audio listeners, I will actually say it, your number 1 last year bucket are golfers who did not play this event. And we can go through every year to see which types of golfers those are, whether or not they have course history or not. Your second bucket are golfers who missed the cut the year before, believe it or not. So that first bucket, again, did not play. 34.67% of top 10 golfers over the last 6 years, last 6 years, were golfers who did not play the year before. 25.33% of top 10 golfers missed the cut the year before. And then our number 3 bucket at 14.67% are golfers who finished top 20. So our top 3 buckets, if we were to look, have a sum percentage of 74.67. So nearly 75% of top 10 golfers fall under these 3 buckets. Now, really, all that's saying is when we look at the player pool or the field, I should say, we're going to want to target last year 1s, last year 2s, and last year 3s. And let's go ahead and just get into it right now because I don't want to miss out on explaining this later. So let's go ahead and just look at all of our last year 1s. And the big thing that kind of that stands out to me is how many golfers are in this bucket. So if I keep scrolling down, you're going to see all the different names. And for my audio listeners, don't worry, I'm going to tell you the number. 95 golfers. So this is going to be a full field event of 156. 95 of them are last year 1s. So that being the best bucket is a no-brainer, right? Because we could probably see this year in, year out. It seems to be a tournament a lot of newcomers come to. Usually it's a fall event where basically graduates from the web.com tour, now the Korn Ferry tour, that, junior or JV level tour, basically. The graduates from that tour come to this one. This is one of their first events. This is usually like event number 7, somewhere between 7 and 10 on the PGA year. I mean, it also always comes before the new year. And a lot of elite golfers start their season usually right at the new year. So they're not coming to this event, which means it opens up to a lot of really old golfers who are still trying to hold on to their PGA Tour card, or younger golfers that just got it. So again, makes sense that our pool is going to be a little higher with last year ones. Now, what I like to do personally is look at my min max. You know, what's the minimum number of top 10 golfers that we see year in, year out that have a last year bucket 1 score? And the minimum is 3. So really, if we're creating lineups, in my opinion, you would want to create at least, well, there are different ways to do this, but I usually like to just take the min and use that as my anchor position. But I also like to use this percentage over here, and basically depending on how many lineups I create. So if I create 100 lineups, there are 6 places per lineup. 6 times 100, 600 places. So I am trying to fill 600 positions. And what I'll do is take 600 and times it by this to get my anchor number. And let me just do that. I mean, I know a lot of you guys probably don't have the time to do something like that. I know a lot of you guys probably don't care or don't create that many lineups. But I can just give you a sense of what that looks like. So 600 times 0.3467, that's your easy way of doing a percentage. So 208 of my lineups. So if I'm creating 100 lineups, 208 positions are going to be filled with last year ones, which averages out to obviously be 2, having 3 in some. But what you really could do is, and if you want to get really technical, put some lineups with 4 in it, put some with 3, put some with 2, and then put some with 1. I would not go and put 0 in them, but you can do either of those. And again, let's look at our pool here. In our strategy video, I will go over our best last year 1 plays, you know, based by stats, and anchor our lineups that way. So when it comes to last year 1s, you can see right up at the top, you have Sungjae Im, Tommy Fleetwood, Tyrrell Hatton, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Jason Day, Louis Oosthuizen, Shane Lowry, Joaquin Niemann. I mean, there's a lot of good golfers. I think I might cut it off at Justin Rose, perhaps. So we really have like 11 really good golfers. I mean, you have Sam Burns, which I know that's one of Chad Eckert's favorite plays for this upcoming tournament. But like, I mean, you have Brandt Snedeker down here, Wyndham Clark. There's a lot of good golfers. Harold Varner III, I just saw. A lot of good golfers in this last year 1 bucket. Now, a lot of it's going to have to go off of kind of a salary strategy, which I will cover in this video as well. So it really depends on who you want to anchor with. Who do you like the best? And we'll get a little bit into that. But those are your top last year 1 buckets. So we might as well just go right to the last year 2 buckets. Again, last year 1, 34.67%. Last year 2, 25.33%. And this is headed by Russell Henley, Harris English, Kevin Kisner, Charles Howell III, Sepp Straka, who is kind of a newcomer. He's been on tour for a couple years, but then right underneath him, Matt Kuchar, who is kind of a wily veteran. You know, we could call him that right now. A really good and talented up-and-comer, Cameron Davis. Peter Malnati, who's been pretty hot over the last few tournaments he's played. Everyone's favorite, Patrick Rogers. You know, Patrick Rogers' bucket combinations and just last year bucket has been so awful over the last 4 tournaments, I think. He's either been a last year 5 or a last year 6. This is the first time I've seen him as a last year 2, which, if a lot of people are off of him, this might give me a reason to play him a little bit more. I don't really care about ownership leverage, but it kind of can go hand in hand with a favorite play, and his bucket is actually a really decent bucket. So going with these golfers, another good string or pool of last year 2 golfers. So if you wanted to see what I would do with that, let's go ahead and look at the percentage. 25.33. So out of 100 lineups, once again, 600 places, 600 times 0.2533, we get 151. So between the 2 buckets, you know, so if I'm doing 100 lineups, 208 of them go to last year 1s, 151, I'm sorry, not lineups, positions. So 100 lineups, 600 positions, 208 of them belong to last year 1s, 151, really 152 belong to last year 2s. Those numbers together give you 360, which is over half of really the player pool in creating those lineups. So if you even wanted to break that down a little bit differently, let's say you create 10 lineups, right? Obviously move the decimal place over, 15 positions would go to last year 2s, 200 or 20 or maybe 21 would go to last year 1s. So it just depends on how you do the math in your head, how you'd like it. And I'm not saying you absolutely have to go with this. It's just that the historical numbers go along with that. Let's look at our best last year 3s. And we'll look at the other buckets too. I'm not just going to stop it here. But really the last year 3s, which were golfers who finished top 20 the year before, we can see 14.67. Your minimum was 0. And I forgot to do that with last year 2s. So last year 2s, your minimum was 1. Maximum was 6. So obviously you can get pretty high. Your average number was 3 for that bucket. Your average number for the last year 1s was 4. And then the average number for last year 3s was 1.8. So, I guess if you want to go over that way, you certainly can. There's just multiple ways to create lineups with the bucket system. I personally just like using the percentage here. So again, 600 times 0.1467, we have 88. So 88 positions would go to last year 3s. And I guess when we combine all of these, I wonder if there's a faster way if we can just put those together. Doesn't really matter. So we do something like that. 448. Again, if you divide that by 10 out of 60 places, or yeah, it would be divided by 10. 60 places, nearly 45 of them would go to last year 1s, 2s, and 3s. So only 15 would go elsewhere. And your last year 3s is headed by Webb Simpson, Sebastian Munoz, Brian Harmon, Brendan Todd, Denny McCarthy, and that's probably the last I'm going to talk about. The rest of them, not terrible plays. When we get into course fit and the strategy video, we can maybe find that one of these guys kind of pops off a little bit more or a little better than another one. But I mean, it's hard not to play someone like Webb. I will tell you right now, I will play a lot of Webb, but if you're going to pivot from Webb, pivot to one of these guys and fill in the rest of your lineups. I think that's a positive way to do it. Let's go ahead and look at the rest of the buckets. So last year 4s, if we look at the notes, last year 4s, 12%, which is still pretty high. It's not very far behind the last year 3 bucket. So it's very much in play. And really your minimum was 0, but you actually have a higher max number than your last year 3s. Average is 1.5 as opposed to 1.8. But either way, if you're going to pivot from last year 3s, maybe you think none of the last year 3s will finish inside the top 10, which is probably highly unlikely with Webb being up there. You could pivot to last year 4s. And those 4 buckets alone equal out to be 86.67% of top 10 plays over the last 6 years. This bucket's actually really small. There are 7 golfers in it. So here's the other thing to go with the bucket system. I sometimes can get enamored by, say, a bucket combination if I see it's a high, a high amount of that bucket combination finishing inside the top 10, I kind of fall in love with it. I keep forgetting, though, that each bucket, say last year bucket and last week bucket, has to be kind of independently analyzed. So we have 7 golfers in this bucket. Now, volume alone, we probably aren't going to see, like, the likelihood of one of these guys finishing inside the top 10 isn't very high, especially when it's the top guy, Stuart Sink. So really, I'm not going to focus too much on a particular last year 4, and I'm not really going to focus too much. I mean, if we were to use the same strategy that I was currently imploring, it would be 600 times 0.12, 72 positions out of 600. That's okay, because if I'm making 100 lineups, I could either put one last year 4 in exactly 72 lineups, or I could, maybe go 2 of them, in say 20 lineups, and then I would have 32, positions available. I don't think that's going to hurt me necessarily. And when you're creating a lot of lineups, I don't necessarily care about sticking to a core. I do like to kind of, I wouldn't say water down my ownership, but I don't mind owning, almost one share of everybody and just mixing them in with other lineups. I do have a core. I typically do go with a core, but like say last year 4s, I wouldn't mind, kind of mixing some of these guys in. I really like Mark Hubbard. I don't mind Luke List, and I really don't mind Stuart Sink. Maybe it's a good reason to play Stuart Sink, or even Maverick McNeely. Honestly, not terrible. So I'm not, although this bucket is small, I'm not necessarily shy in playing it. Last year 5s. So last year, if we go to last year, Tyler Duncan won this as a 5-4. That means he was a last year 5, last week 4. Both of these bucket both of these buckets aren't good to begin with, but that bucket combination isn't good either. But looking at this tournament, especially last year, sure, we see, just as many last ones. We actually see more last year 2s than we do last year 1s inside the top 10. Actually, it's a tie. I missed this one. And then you have a couple 4s, or 3 4s, a 3, and a 5. So still, like, the bucket system reigns supreme here, but a 5-4 won this tournament. And it was Tyler Duncan, who, course history didn't look the greatest. Recent form didn't really look that good. His Bermuda stats didn't look good. The rest of his stats didn't look good. It was kind of puzzling that someone like Tyler Duncan won. So we can actually use that information and look at this year's last year 5 buckets, and you actually have some pretty decent golfers. I like all of these golfers, if I'm being honest. Mackenzie Hughes has been playing really good golf from the playoffs all the way until now. Zach Johnson is a wily veteran, just like Matt Kuchar. I don't think there's an issue playing Zach Johnson. Austin Cook just had a second place at the Shriners. Not a terrible play. I like Adam Hadwin's ability to shape shots. I don't think it's really necessary here. He's, in my opinion, kind of a shorter Bubba. If the course is too straight, I think he kind of has issues playing it because he has too many thoughts of how to flight a golf ball into a hole when all you really have to do is just hit the damn ball, Matt Jones, a very talented golfer. Same with Pat Kazire and Doug Yim. Don't sleep on Doug Yim. He's a very good, I don't even know if he has his tour card or even like temporary status, but he's eventually going to get there. He's a talented golfer. So really don't stray away from the last year 5s. Last year 6s, it's really interesting seeing Doc Redman. Now, we saw Doc Redman as a last year 6, I think at, shoot, where did we last see Doc? Let's see, he is $8,000. Doc Redman at the Houston Open. I think we saw him as a last year 6 there. Let me go ahead and open up the Houston Open. Tons and tons of spreadsheets, tons and tons of data. I just want to show you where Doc Redman was. Make sure that I am correctly saying. Okay, never mind. He was a 3-3 at the Houston Open. Where was he prior to that? Bermuda, Shriners. We'll look at the Bermuda. And if he finished 4th and he was that bucket score, then I'm just gonna eat my words and say, never mind, don't worry. Doc Redman was a last year 4. Okay, last one is the Shriners. And then I won't waste any more time looking up Doc Redman. So let's see here. He finished what? He missed the cut at the Shriners. We look. Shriners. Doc Redman. He was a 5-4. Okay. So not a good bucket, but he wasn't a 6 like I had said. Either way, this tells me to kind of dial it back on ownership of Doc. If you want to go buy the bucket system, and I mean, the last year 6 pool has 8 golfers in it, not a lot. You can see that 4% of golfers inside the top 10 at this tournament were last year 6s. So if I were to go and if I was creating, 100 lineups, 600 positions, once again, 0.04 would be 24 lineups to have a last year 6 in. Now, if I'm creating 100 lineups, I have no issue basically making 24 lineups all with Doc in it. I could maybe go, split it up, only do 10 with him or 13 or whatever, put him in a cascading core type of lineup. I think 19 is the number where he could be in it all the time. Actually, it would be 16 because you take 3 away from him. So yeah, he could be in 16 lineups that way, and then you can kind of mix in the rest of the guys, which I think that's a really good idea. But I'm going to temper my expectation on Doc Redman. So if you're creating 10 lineups, it's either 2 or 3 that you'd want to put him in. And then that would be your last year 6 exposure right there. You wouldn't want to put any more. Doc Redman has the ability to do really well at this golf course, but the bucket system says don't play that many last year 6s, if at all. So that was kind of a rundown of all the golfers within all of the last year buckets. I don't necessarily look at last week buckets. They are here, and it is pretty even amongst all of these. Now, your top bucket would be golfers who did not play the week before. So this is obviously helpful for all of those that were not in the Masters, which would even make sense anyways, because the Masters, for those that made the cut, would be kind of a very grueling, grinded out type of tournament. And they could be fatigued coming into this tournament. Or it's not that far away since it is in Georgia. Or not Georgia. You go from Georgia to South Carolina, which isn't that far away. So it's not a far distance to get to. You're not going to be jet lagged. It's not going to be tiring. And I think St. George's Island is kind of a vacation destination. Or is it St. Simon's Island? I can't remember. I think it's St. Simon's Island. Either way, it is more of a vacation destination where, this might be kind of a relaxation spot where if the mindset is right, you can do really well. But obviously, if it's kind of complacent and just taking in everything, maybe it's a reason not to play golfers who did not play last week, or that did play last week. But if they did play, your second bucket would be golfers who missed the cut. Now, that would also make sense. Golfers who missed the cut at the Masters might be, hitting themselves, thinking like, I should have done better. And likewise for golfers who finished top 20, they're probably feeling really good about themselves. So those three buckets, golfers who did not play, number 1, golfers who missed the cut, number 2, and golfers who finished top 20 last week, that's number 3. All of those buckets together consist of nearly 75% of top 10 finishes over the last 6 years. Just going over that one really quick. I mean, just looking at the top of the leaderboard here, you have Webb, who is a last week 3. Again, that's top 20 from last week. Same with Sung Jae and same with Tommy Fleetwood. I would say out of all 3 of these guys, maybe Sung Jae battled the hardest. I almost would think that Simpson, for how well he did play, he was getting his groove going, and I think he would be more primed for a better finish, finishing with inside. A better finish at this tournament because of his finish being a top 20 last week. Fleetwood kind of followed him on Sunday a little bit, watched him obviously on the internet, not in person. He was all over the place, but he did score well. I don't think that really provides me a lot of confidence. One of my favorite plays, the thumbnail of this video, Tyrrell Hatton was a last week 2. He missed the cut. Now, I feel like he had a really good finish at the Houston Open. He finished 7th at the Houston Open and missed the cut at the Masters. So he was coming into the Masters with good form, missed the cut. I think this is a great bounce back spot for him. And he's on Bermuda, which I know he's pretty decent at. So either way, I like those golfers. I'm not really going to go... Actually, I'll filter out, but I'm not really going to provide a full analysis on last week 1s or last week 2s or last week 3s. You can see them on the board. Last year buckets usually matter a little bit more than last week buckets. But I would say this. Those 3 buckets typically are always, like those 3 ranges, did not play, missed cut, top 20. Those 3 finishing positions, as you want to call them that, they're always very favorable ones. So you can see here are all your last week 2s. Not a lot. There's only 15 golfers in it. And if you were to use that percentage thing again, I'm not really going to type it all out, but it's going to be very similar to the last year. So that was 151 lineups or 152 lineups out of, 152 positions out of 600. It's going to be very similar to the last week. So in all reality, load up on these guys. And there are a lot of good golfers here that obviously you had to qualify for the Masters. You're going to be good if you do that. And then I'm guessing the last week 3 bucket is even smaller. This is awesome because now you just add more percentages to it. The last week bucket is a little bit more watered down than the last year bucket. Either way, still chalks out. The last thing I'm going to talk about for buckets are the combinations. I'm already at 30 minutes. Man, I was hoping this was going to be a lot quicker. It's rainbow colored, meaning there are so many different combinations. It's hard to kind of look at right here. But I do this every single week. I kind of break it down by top 5, top 10. Your top bucket for top 10 finishes is a 1-2. Finished 13% of top 10 finishes. That's pretty good. And your 1-2s, so if I were to go to that, again, this bucket, the last week bucket 2s, not very big, but even this bucket combination, even smaller. 9 golfers. Now, my experiences, especially with the Masters, what I've learned, don't fall in love with the bucket combination. But if you're choosing between last year 1s or even last week 2s, well, not so much. Yeah, if you're looking at last week 2s, your favorable one would be pairing it up with the last year 1. Same goes with, if you're looking at last year 1s, who's going to be your favorite golfer, and go that way. I'm going to create a model that's going to incorporate all of that. So I will find the best, 1-2 to play, or really the best last year 1, because I'm going to incorporate all of that information, all of the buckets, like how often you should play them, all that stuff. It will be baked in to a number that I'll have right here for the strategy video. So going back there, I'll just give you the top 10 buckets. So bucket combinations: 1-2 at 13.33%, 2-1 at 9.33%, 2-2 at 8%, 3-1 at 8%, 1-1 at 6.67%, which is surprising. Your 1-1 bucket's usually the highest. 1-3 at 5.53%, 1-4 at 4%, 1-6 at 4%. All these are at 4 that I'm going to name: 2-3, 2-5, 4-2, 4-4, and 5-1. So all of those buckets, really the ones that stand out, because again, it's no surprise to see a bunch of last year 1s in the mix. It's also not a surprise to see a bunch of last week 1s in that mix. But seeing like a 4-4, a 2-5, those are kind of surprising. Even a 2-2, those are a little surprising. So just keep that in mind. And I think, I don't know, it to me, it makes lineup creating a little more fun. And you got to see it. Actually, throughout this whole video, I would just rewind, go back, take a look, and pause the video. Write down your favorite 1-2s. Write down your favorite, 3-1s or anything like that. That's what I would recommend. The last piece I want to talk about is kind of going over salaries. The reason I want to go over this is because DraftKings does a pretty good job pricing, the favorites at the top, and then obviously the long shots at the bottom. This is kind of a way to analyze, should we be, favoring the favorites? Should we try to incorporate more long shots? A lot of this pricing has odds baked into it. So obviously I have it broken out from 2020 to 2018. I also have kind of the count over here of how many times we see them inside the top 10 or top 20. There really isn't a price tag that is really, stands not head over heels, but that stands out more than another. However, I will say if you group them up into ranges, 11.6, 11.8, and 11,000. I mean, 11.6 is tied for the most time seeing inside the top 5. And you see, really, I don't really have to go with 11.6, but 11.6 and above hasn't finished worse than 4th place. So if we go to 2021 and we sort this by salary, we don't have 11.6. We have 11.2. But if I were to go to 2020, put a filter on this, who is our 11.6 guy? Was Webb. Was he the top guy? He was. The next guy was 11,000. If I go to 2019, put a filter on this. I think I can put a filter on this. Who was the most expensive guy? It was Webb again, finishing 3rd. He was 11.8. So, see, and I don't have 2018's salary, do I? We'll just look at the recent form tab. This will have it. 11.6 Kevin Kisner, 11,000 Brian Harmon. So really, finding the top guy is going to be beneficial. And then the salaries that are underneath it are in the 9K and in the 6K. So I think finding someone at 11,000 and then say 9,000. I mean, look at all of the 9K golfers that we've ever seen. I'm going to include 10-9 in this whole range. That's a lot of golfers finishing inside the top 10 and top 5 in those salary ranges. So, you know, I don't think I'm not going to say, okay, let's go to another piece of analysis before I say what I'm about to say. Your average salary is $83,500. So 8,357. DraftKings allows you 8,333. That means using, you know, and this is again top 10. This isn't looking at like top 6 golfers or anything like that. If we were looking at top 6, it'd be easier to say this and say, okay, 83.5. That means we're looking for using up all 50,000 of your salary. But using 10 or, you know, the top 10 golfers, 83.5 kind of tells you you can go ahead and use all 50,000 of the salary in making lineups. And it's not going to really matter that much. You're probably going to find the optimal lineup around that. Leaving off a lot of money isn't really going to matter. The minimum inside the top 10 that we've seen, 6,100. The maximum, 11,800. And then here's a breakdown of how many golfers we've seen. So we've had a total of 35 over the last 3 years. Let me just double check that. For whatever reason, I think that's wrong. Nope, it's 35. So of the 35 top 10 finishes over the last 3 years, here is a breakdown of prices inside the top 10. 14.29% were 10K and above. 25.71 was 9 to 10. 14.29, 8 to 9, 22.86%, 7 to 8, and 22.86% below 7. All that tells me find an 11K guy, a 9K guy, an 8K guy, 7, 6, and then whatever you have left over, put it in that. I think that's probably going to be a good way to start out your builds. I'm not saying do that for every single one, but it's going to be pretty beneficial. I did not update this, so I guess I can do it right now. We had a 6,600 golfer, $6,600 golfer last year win the tournament. 11-6, ended up finishing second. So really looking at your optimal lineup versus the winning GPP lineup, you needed Webb Simpson at 11-6. It was 6, 11, 7, 9, and actually 2 6s. And you did leave a lot of money, despite what I just said. So you'd have left $2,400 on the table. But you could have easily went from... Nope, you couldn't have done that. Denny McCarthy? There you go. So just pivoting from, say, KH Lee to Denny McCarthy would have... Yeah, Denny didn't score a lot of points last year. So it's a bad example to use. Okay, this works much better. Going with KH Lee and Scotty Scheffler, that's 49,900. So, you know, you'd have missed the optimal lineup by a few points. It looks like you'd have missed it by 3. But, you know, using 49,900, you could have had a pretty good lineup. And you'd have had a 111K golfer, 2 9s, 2 6s, and a 7. So it's kind of following that same logic I was just providing, minus the 8K golfer. So interesting there, creating lineups. What I wanted to do, or what I was thinking what I wanted to do, was kind of go a little bit more into each year and look at, you know, the different last year finishes and see how or who was in those buckets. But I'm going to leave it at this. This is already a little too long, so I'm going to, let's see. I covered salaries, I covered the buckets. I think that's all I wanted to do with this video. And this is what I plan to do on Sundays most tournaments, but I'm not going to actually have the DraftKings information because that comes out on Mondays. So we'll really only be looking at like the buckets, but also speculating on the salaries. So really just giving you a strategy to use on salaries despite not knowing what those golfers are. So again, I'll be doing these on Sundays going forward. Again, it should save time, and hopefully it doesn't run 40 minutes long like this one has. So with that, I am going to bid you adieu. Thank you for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you in a course fit video soon. All right, bye.